Welcome to the Lucas Rockwood Show. I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a serial entrepreneur, I'm a father, but first and foremost, I'm a student. I love learning. This show is all about me scratching my own itch. I go out into the wild and find smart people, and I learn from them, and I share that information with you. Medical doctors, researchers, yoga teachers, people focused on living inspired lives, and hopefully some of that inspiration rubs off on us while we're listening. On this week's show, we'll be chatting about living and working spaces specifically, how to optimize them for happiness, for peace, for sleep, for productive work. It's a big topic because many of us can't control our work environment. Many of us are thrown into a situation where we have a desk that we've been assigned and that's where we work. Many of us can't control our living situation. Maybe we're stuck in a mortgage or a lease that we can't break. Maybe the place we're living in is connected to someone that's related to us. Maybe for whatever reasons, financial or other, we're unable to live in our dream house right now, probably most of us. And it can be really challenging if you're not sleeping well, if you're not working well, if you're feeling stressed out. And there are some simple things you can do when you understand some of the psychology behind your living environments. I'm lousy at this and I'd like to get better, hence the show. Hope you find it valuable too. Email me if you have questions, comments, feedback, podcast@yogabody.com. If you like the show, show your support by taking a screenshot when you're listening on your phone and upload it to Instagram and tag me @yogabody or @LucasRockwood, or tag us both. Thanks for listening. So hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Today's show is called A Home That Loves You, and I am joined here with Lily Bernheimer. Lily's an environmental psychology consultant, a writer, and a researcher. Really interesting body of work. Her first book just came out. It's called The Shaping of Us, How Everyday Spaces Structure Our Lives, Behavior, and Well-Being. We'll be chatting about her work and her book today. She regularly speaks at forums such as Clerkenwell Design Week, the London Festival of Architecture, and Open House Worldwide. Her work and writing has been featured in The Guardian, BBC Capital, Architecture Today, the London Evening Standard, and The List. You can learn more about her work at spaceworksco.com, and her book is available on Amazon, and we'll link up in the show notes to some other booksellers where you can find it as well. Lily, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So a book is a big project. Obviously, you have a very interesting career path. What was the impetus behind the book itself?
I got into environmental psychology as a field. Originally thought that I wanted to become an urban planner, and then realized that while urban planners are doing amazing work to plan where our cities will look like, I really wanted to be focusing more on research in terms of how we can make spaces better for people's well-being, whether that's at the city level or the housing level or workspaces. So I started doing consulting work after getting my master's in environmental psychology over in the UK, and then was actually approached by a literary agent who said, this is a really interesting area of research, and you seem to be working to make it accessible. What would you think about writing a book? So it was kind of a dream come true to have someone come to me and ask me to do it, and that was really how it came about. Yeah.
So I've lived this blessed life, but a very strange life. I've lived all over the place, and I've moved pretty much my whole life. The longest I've lived anywhere is here in Barcelona, and it's been 10 years. But I'm in my second home, and this home I'm in right now is the longest I've lived anywhere, and I'm at 5 years right now. So I have this really weird relationship with homes, and I've lived in very different places. I've lived in log cabins in the mountains in California. I have lived in little beach bungalows in Thailand. I have lived most of my adult life in really urban settings. I used to live in a 250 square foot apartment in the West Village. And all that moving really gave me a strange relationship to house and space and home. And the relationship is, I feel like I can't invest in it. And so usually the reaction when people come to my home is they're like, did you move in yesterday? Where's all your stuff? I have almost nothing, and I'm usually getting less and less. Like, left to my own devices, I throw away all the kids' stuff. I throw away everything, and I just kind of am at home in this big empty space. And as I've gotten older, I've also just really realized how much space affects things in my office as well. Really haven't put a lot of conscious thought into the way that things are. My main thing is just throwing things away. This is my only strategy. But I am very much affected by space, and I have yoga studios as well. So I think about, the vibe there and the smells and the lights and things like that. But I'm lousy at it, and I know that it affects people's experience. I know that it affects my own consciousness, my ability to concentrate, my ability to sleep. And I think it's interesting. When I first found your work, I assumed that you were a civic planner or something like this, and it was interesting to see that you're taking kind of a psychology approach to just spaces in general. So maybe we could start with this office environment, because most people listening are probably on their way to the office, or they're sneaking. They're sneaking at the office and they have their headphones on. They're listening, and you have this concept of a prospector or a refuger, I believe, in the office environment. Can you speak to this? What's that about?
Absolutely. I've done a lot of work in offices and a lot of work in co-working spaces specifically, which are really interesting places because, people tend to have a little bit more sort of choice over where they sit or where their little, company group is going to sit. So doing this work and, just from all my own experience working in different workspaces myself, I noticed that people tended to kind of show a preference for one type of seat or another. So a lot of people would say, oh, I absolutely have to have my back to the wall. I will not be able to focus unless I can, have my back to the wall and be looking out of the room. And then other people would say, oh, we're rearranging the office. What are we doing? Okay, well, can I please have a seat where I'll be looking towards the window because, that's just the highlight of my day. And this links back to a really interesting theory in environmental psychology called refuge and prospect. You'll find all types of spaces you go into. Say you go into a restaurant, and the restaurant's not full yet. You'll tend to find people first choose the seats where they have their back to the wall and are facing towards the door. And when you look at the way that we tend to situate our housing in, little towns or villages, we're the most desirable places to be. People like houses that are kind of up on a hillside with a view of the ocean or the direction that sort of incoming traffic might be approaching from. So environmental psychologists theorize that this goes back to a really sort of evolutionary security instinct that when we were being chased by, lions or other people or whatever threats there were, the most advantageous place to be would be that sort of position where you could see any threats or opportunities that might be coming your way, and where you could also be sure that no threats would be coming up from behind you. So we tend to find this, architecturally, this kind of preference for positions which afford us both refuge and prospect. But then what I found in my consulting work is that a lot of people, while they would ideally like to have both of those, they show sort of stronger preference for either a refuge position or a prospect position. And I also have given this kind of seating the name of ninja-proof seats, because I once worked in an office with a lot of computer programmers who would describe this type of seat as a ninja-proof seat, because when you're sitting with your back to the wall, you know that no ninjas can sneak up from behind you. It also means that no one can look at your computer and see whether you're playing some kind of, computer games or something like that. But, yeah.
So prospect is I'm sitting with my back against the wall, and refuge is the other way, or are they the same thing?
So ideally, the refuge means that you have your back against the wall. The prospect means that you have a prospect of what is going to approach you. And so a lot of times those two things might happen at the same time, that you both have I'm sitting in my living room right now. I have my back to the wall and I'm also looking out the window. But when you're in a room like an office or a restaurant that has many, many seats, some of those seats will only give you refuge and some of those seats will only give you prospect.
I see. And how do we determine what is best for us? We just try out different things and see where we feel comfortable?
I think that if you go into a room, yeah, like a restaurant or an office, and just think, where am I most drawn to? What's my instinct about where I feel most comfortable sitting here? You and try that a few times, and then notice what you're finding. You'll find out whether you're a refuger or a prospector. And it seems like these things relate to other personality factors. So introverts tend to have a sort of just greater need for a sort of more protective instincts about their space. Often, need a little bit more space, can be more sensitive to noise. So I think introverts may be more likely to be refugers, and then extroverts, or people who are very open to new experiences. Openness is one of the top 5 psychological personality traits that psychologists study. And so extrovert or open people, may be more likely to be prospectors, because they're more attuned towards like needing that sort of like energy and stimulation that you get from being able to look out the window and seeing what else is going on.
So I've got this open plan office. I don't work in an open plan. I'm in a closed door office myself, and I have been for, I don't know, since I stopped working out of my home, which was 7 or 8 years ago. And so I hide out in an office all day. And I feel sort of like a jerk for doing it. My whole team's down on the same floor. A couple of us are hidden out. But I'm kind of convinced, I was just chatting with my team recently, I'm kind of convinced it's no good. I don't know. I know all these co-working spaces are like this, the laptop on the open desk and the coffee and the free beer and the ping pong and all this stuff. And I don't think anybody's getting anything done. And I feel like they're just constantly caught in this loop of interruptions, which I don't know the neuroscience behind it, but I imagine there's some kind of dopamine hit that sort of feels this sympathetic nervous system response. Feels like you're doing something, but really you're just constantly opening emails, going back, opening windows, checking back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm really down on it. And everywhere I go, it's open plan. Here in Barcelona, there's loads of these co-working spaces opening up. WeWork's here now. They're just all over the place. And I'm just not, and maybe it's my own personality. I'm certainly introverted, and I'm definitely high in openness, but definitely really high in introversion. And so it's difficult for me to be in an environment where I get interrupted. But I'm curious, you've obviously looked at this a lot. What are your thoughts if you had to just roll the dice? And, I imagine it's different if you're working with a bunch of coders or you're working with a publishing company or something like this. But if you had to roll the dice, what would you do? Would you do open office? Would you do closed doors? Would you do a combo?
I think I would probably do a combo, depending on what, exactly like you said, what the nature of the work in this office is, and then based on that, what type of personality profiles you might be seeing because of that. So I would step back and say I wouldn't be able to answer that without having more information about, what the company is. For me personally, I think I would have a combination. So to start with, yes, basically everything you're saying about open offices is true. There is basically no evidence to suggest that there is really anything good about open offices other than cost saving.
Yeah.
From a psychological, behavioral well-being point of view, we've had very strong evidence since the 80s, which has shown that there's no connection between open plan offices being better for communication or collaboration, which is the main things that people generally, I think there genuinely were some people who were very like idealistic and thought, oh, this is going to be great for collaboration and communication. But they started doing research back then and found, no, it's not actually doing this, because when people are together all the time and sharing acoustic space all the time, then actually sometimes they kind of retreat from having those collaborative conversations because it's too much, they're overwhelmed. Yeah. In terms of noise, it's interesting. There are some different implications for different types of work. So yeah, if you're doing just like when I'm just like shooting off emails, it's kind of not really like higher level analytical work. Having a background hum of noise can actually be helpful for that type of work. But anytime that you have, sort of the type of noise that is like intermittent, and intelligible. So like if you can hear one person and they're talking and they're telling this story and you can hear what they're saying, and it's also up and down and changing a lot, yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about, that kind of stimulation that's like constantly interrupting you. If it's that sort of just background, like when you're in a cafe and not loud music, but a hum of chatter, that can be good when you're doing just sort of more simple work like emails. When you're doing higher level work, like say reading all these academic articles and trying to then translate them into writing a book, or coding, for instance, then even that back level hum can be very distracting. And also, once again, like we find with introverts, they tend to be more sensitive to noise than extroverts. So that is, very concerning in terms of what we're seeing with these open office trends today. What I will say about co-working spaces that makes them different from a company having an open plan office is that with all sorts of environmental factors, there's what we might like, there's what's less than ideal, but then we find over and over again that the variable of control is really important. So whether that's so do you have control over the lighting in your space? Do you have control over the temperature? Do you have control over the acoustics to some extent? Then whatever that is tends to bother people a lot less. It's like, oh, okay, well, it's hot, but I was able to open the window. I've done something. I've had an effect. I can change my space. Then you're going to be more okay with it being a little bit too warm because you feel a sense of agency. So with co-working spaces, often, someone has made a choice to work in that space, and then often also has a good deal of choice about where they're going to work in that space. Oh, okay, this day I'm doing more quiet work. I'll go work in this area that's more quiet, that you don't always get when it's a company just saying, okay, this is how it is now. It's open office, and oh, you don't like it? Well, fine. You have to work out of your own house today then, So that's where I think we see a difference with co-working spaces. And also, I think co-working spaces have, they have to be really inventive and accommodating and sort of carve out different areas for different types of things, or else people aren't going to keep working there. And so that's different from when you're just working for a company that's just saying, okay, here's how it is now. No one has their own desk or whatever anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like the fact that they're changing a lot. I do. I there's a couple of co-working spaces that I do work out of occasionally here, and I appreciate the fact that it feels different when I go in, just because the routine of any work environment has benefits, but the downside is the routine, right? And you fall into the same patterns. So just like you said, just the newness of it, whether it's new people or a new setup or a new structure, it gives something to me. I don't know what it is, but
yeah. It sounds like you're someone who thrives on change and newness a little bit with the changes in your home space as well. So for some people, that's really distracting. For some people, having to set up at a new desk every day, that takes a lot of psychological energy that they could be putting into their work. Whereas for other people, I'm like that. I don't like to work in the same place all the time. I find I get to associating that space with maybe being not as productive as I would like to be. And then I go to a new space. It's like the way they say your bed should be associated with sleep. So don't do other activities in your bed. The same way for me, if a certain workspace becomes associated with not being the most productive, and then I go to a different place, then I feel it's easier to get into that productive zone again.
So let's jump to the house because, second most, first, second most important place for people. Like I said, I don't have anything sophisticated. I talked to this feng shui person once, and they said, don't put anything underneath your bed. And that was the only thing I ever did. And I was like, that makes a big difference. That helps me fall asleep. I don't know if I believe in this stuff, but that made a big difference. But there are certain things. I have a big, old, crazy Barcelona Spanish apartment, huge ceilings and huge hallway. And so it's kind of a funky place. And my daughter's room, I love, and I just hate my room. I can't stand it. I just hate it. Every time I go into a room, I'm just like, can we trade? She won't give me a room, and her bed faces a different direction. My room is completely silent. Hers is a little bit white noise. Other than that, I can't really figure it out. But I really like it better. I feel like I would be happier there.
So I have developed a checklist exactly for helping people sort of think through these problems and think about all the different factors in a room or a workspace that are affecting how they feel about the space. So I call it the balance checklist because it's a way of thinking about how to balance all these different factors, but also, of course, because it forms a handy acronym. So the B stands for biophilia. Is that something that you or people listening would be familiar with? That term?
No, not familiar with that.
Okay. So biophilia literally means love of nature or love of the living world. But it refers to our sort of innate human attraction to elements, features, shapes, and forms from the natural world. Sunlight, trees,
sunset, sunrise, stand on a mountain peak. Everybody reacts. Yes, you don't have to learn it, right? It's just innate reaction to nature.
Yeah, it's innate. It's innate. Yeah. But what we find over and over again is that the things that support our well-being best in the built environment tend to link back to things that would have supported our well-being in the natural environment. So refuge and prospect, which we were talking about earlier, is an example of this. Like in people say that people theorize that one of the very appealing things about a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture is that he often had these sort of like darker spaces with lower ceilings, which would then open up to lighter spaces with higher ceilings. And so that's, creating this kind of refuge prospect effect that we just feel really safe and cozy and like, you found a little cave that has this like beautiful expansive view and that feels very like calming and cozy. So biophilia, I think that's just kind of like a guiding light to think about all of the different factors that might be working or not working in a space, whether that's light or shape or proportion. And also then, literally, do you have any, sort of natural materials in the space? Do you have views of nature? All of that as well. So then the first A stands for atmospheric qualities. So that brings together light, temperature, air quality, air circulation, that kind of thing. The L stands for layout. So how well is the space or the room laid out in terms of, the sort of like functions and needs that you have of that space and the people who are using it. And the next A stands for amenities. So how well does the space support your well-being in terms of providing amenities for your rest, your nutrition? How does it affect your level of physical activity? So all of those things impact your well-being ultimately. And then the N stands for noise. We've talked about noise in offices, but also, residentially, is it a noisy street? Is that impacting your sleep? The C stands for cohesion, which brings together some of these factors like control that we were talking about earlier, and also kind of how does the space support community, communication. And the E stands for energy. So, the way that we interact with the planet, our use of energy also impacts our own well-being. So how is that showing up in a space? And then finally, D is for design. So, this is all about design to some extent, but color, proportions, shapes, how do those all come together in terms of what you're trying to do and get out of a space? Like they say, rounded forms have been shown to be sort of more calming for us. And on the other hand, angular forms can be a little bit more, sort of uptight or competitive feeling. So neither of those are good or bad, but you might want to think about which one of those you're using depending on, is this like a competitive test-taking environment or is this a place you want to be relaxing in? So tell me about these two bedrooms. What's different between them in terms of some of these factors that I just brought up?
This sounds crazy, but my bed faces one direction, her bed faces the other, and because of the way the room's laid out, I can't switch my bed. So I think the bed direction is part of it. There's also a bathroom connected to my room, which I think is bad. I think I don't want that bathroom there. I think it bothers me, just like, I don't know. For some reason, I think I would like to have a bathroom in like down the hallway or something like that. Her room also overlooks quite a big street, quite a central street here in Barcelona, and it has kind of a beautiful kind of enclave room that kind of dips out over the street. But it's not quiet. There's always white noise. It's not, you can't decipher anything in particular, but there's always kind of a hum of the street,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's the view from your room like?
The view from my room is actually better. I can see Montjuic. I can see, I probably have like a 120-degree view. It's a little industrial, though, whereas her view, I would say, is more like classic Barcelona architecture, kind of beautiful buildings and stuff like that. And in her room, if I do take a look like really, really hard, I can see the sea, which is it's far. It's probably 2 kilometers away, but I can see the sea. Probably makes a difference. In her room, I can. Yeah, probably does make a difference. Yeah.
Yes. Well, we're definitely getting something here because this is like the classic prospect position that we crave the most. And it's very interesting, why is it that we have this such strong desire to have views of water? We like all kinds of views.
Desperate for it,
but we really, really like views of water. And there's all kinds of interesting findings, like, exercising in nature generally has really great well-being benefits, but exercising in natural settings with water have even greater well-being benefits. There's all of these interesting ways that, because a lot of these series like Biophilia, everything, we're kind of going back to trying to think about, well, what made us the creatures that we are today? What led our species to differentiate itself from primates in the way that we did? And, and how did our environment relate to that? And there's all these interesting things that make us different from other primates that are related to water. So humans as a species, we tend to live, over 50% of the human population lives fairly close to a coastline of some sort. So oceans, but also lakes. We, if you sort of look at where we're clustered around the world, majority of people live near water. And we also have this strange sort of, it's called the mammalian diving reflex. So we can hold our we can hold our breath much, much longer underwater, especially people who train to do this. I think some people can hold their breaths for like up to 20 minutes underwater, which you would never be able to do out of water. And then we have this kind of like subcutaneous layer of blubber-like fat, which no other primates have. So a lot of people believe that our development as a species away from other primates was very closely linked to water, and that possibly our diets in getting the higher sources of protein that we needed to grow our brains to be so big were very oriented towards water-based sources of protein, and possibly, diving, but also wading to collect kind of little aquatic snails and mollusks and things like that. So that, this may have something to do with why we have such a strong preference for views of water, because it was something that was really important to our evolution as a species.
Interesting. I find all this stuff fascinating. So it's interesting as you say that prospecting thing. Suddenly I realize, her room has this weird little thing that like dips out over the street. And so it has these windows that, it's not a flat thing. So I could literally sit there in a chair and I can see the mountain, I can see the sea, I can see architecture. Were I looking for invaders or animals or anything, it's basically an urban mountaintop. That's basically what it is.
Right.
And it's a small one, but I never thought of it as a primal thing, but I'm sure there is something to that for sure.
And it sounds like her room is not completely square. It sounds like the layout is sort of, and what about your room? Is it more
totally square?
Sort of
totally square. Yep.
Totally square. Yeah. So that's another one in terms of layout. I mean, I think we tend to be more drawn to spaces that have some kind of little quirky thing. Actually, really similar thing in the house that I grew up in here in Berkeley. My dad really likes to brag that there are no totally square rooms in the house, which is not true. My bedroom growing up was pretty much, I guess it has like a little kind of funny closet coming off of it, but it's basically square. And also, yeah, when I was growing up, I mean, it was a wonderful house, and I have no complaints. But yeah, I had this same sort of thing where I was just like, why don't I like this room as much as the other rooms? Like it was just sort of a square, so just not very interesting in terms of the shape. And then it just had one window, which didn't have much of a view at all. It just kind of had like a tree in front of it and then another house. So it was a little bit dark. There wasn't very interesting view, but also, most of the other rooms, like it has sort of like a peaked roof. And so then there's these, different interesting sort of shapes of the room. We find that a lot of sort of contemporary environments have this not great combination of being acoustically overstimulating, like we've talked about. And that doesn't have to just do with like offices where people are noisy, but with the materials that are used being, too sort of hard and not absorbent, so the reverberation is greater than it should be. But then we combine acoustic overstimulation with visual understimulation. So when you just have a square room, that's kind of visually boring. It's just a little blah and understimulating. And in nature, we don't find ourselves in totally square spaces with flat walls. I mean, you're always in I guess you could be in a desert, which wouldn't have, which would also be not that differentiated. But generally, it's nature isn't square most of the time. So that just, I think, is a little bit understimulating for us, and that's also not ideal. So when we have, just sort of little like what is this thing you described? Like there's a little sort of
it's like an alcove, enclave kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We like small spaces. I mean, Americans particularly are always thinking like bigger is better, but we actually like having smaller spaces. And like I said with the Frank Lloyd Wright thing, smaller spaces that open out onto bigger spaces, because then we have this sense of choice and like, oh yeah, I want to feel cozy right now. I want to go into a smaller space. We like the ability to have the ability to do that. Yeah.
Lily, great conversation. I'm excited to pick up your book. I'm hoping in your next book you can write a chapter on how to convince your 14-year-old daughter to give you her room, and we'll see how it goes with it. But for people listening who want to pick up your book and follow you online, where's the best place for them to go?
So I would suggest going to indiebound.org. They are a network of independent booksellers, which basically it's like Amazon. You can order it online. They'll send it to you, but, supporting independent bookstores, which are great spaces and very important spaces to be supporting in our cities nowadays. Like you said, also available on Amazon, but I'd really make a pitch for IndieBound.
One of the most common trouble areas for yoga students is their hips. People complain about tight hips and tight hamstrings probably more than any other spot on their body. The reason our hips are so tight in Western culture is because we never sit on the floor, we almost never squat down. In fact, our range of motion in terms of our hip flexion and extension is so shockingly limited that by the time most people are in their 20s, they can't really sit on the floor cross-legged comfortably. Their back's all hunched up and their knees are way up off the ground. And this affects all kinds of things. It affects your standing posture, your running gait, of course your ability to do yoga. Probably half the poses in yoga demand a certain degree of hip mobility. And it also leaves you susceptible to injuries. If you have dysfunctional movement patterns, if your posture is wonky, you can't really lift weight up off the ground. You can't really move like a fully functional human. So it's really important to open up your hips. It just feels great also. You're more comfortable when you travel. You can get through yoga classes more comfortably. You'll also find all different movement practices, whether you're weightlifting in the gym, out for a run, or just doing anything that you might like to do for fun, like skateboarding or surfing or whatever it is just easier when your hips are open. A lot of people don't even realize how blocked they are. I get a lot of questions. We teach a pose called Blaster in our gravity yoga series that's very popular. In any case, a lot of people want to come take my classes. I usually just teach training courses these days, so I'm not that accessible, which is a shame. I'd like to do more public classes, but I'm traveling, I'm teaching, I'm writing, I'm doing these podcasts, and I don't have much time. In an attempt to make myself more accessible and to connect with my listeners, I'm doing a 21-day hip opening challenge. It's a private program. It's available on Instagram in a private group. It's really simple. I know you already have Instagram. You just sign up for the program, you join through the app, and every day you'll practice with me live on video. I will share with you my best hip opening stretches. I'll answer questions. We'll talk about anatomy. I'll show you some bones and some anatomical stuff to think about and show you how to do gravity yoga breathing and practices to really open up your hips. Now, in 21 days, the question is, can I really make progress? And the answer is absolutely. You'll make huge progress. But even more importantly, you'll set the stage for some really massive transformations. When it comes to mobility, usually about 80% of the gains you'll ever make are made in the first year, and usually about half of those gains are made in the first month. So it's really big gains. You'll notice it right away, and it's pretty fun as well. Hip opening poses are really intense and very rewarding as well. I usually do it right before bed or in the evening because the breathing that we do with gravity yoga tends to put you to sleep. In any case, to learn more, go to yogabody.com. Scroll down, you'll see upcoming courses, the 21-day hip opening challenge. I hope you can join me. This week's nutritional tip is in response to a listener question, and the listener question says, "Hey Lucas, what do you think of Nespresso and other instant coffee machines in terms of the coffee pod safety? Do you think they're really good for you?" ? So I've looked into this a bunch. Nespresso machines are probably the biggest brand, but there's all kinds of other brands. Nestle has a big brand, and there's tons of other knockoff brands as well. And for those of you who haven't seen this, there's coffee pods, and the pods are either made of aluminum or they're made of plastic, and they're disposable. It's a huge problem, obviously, with the waste, right? Where do these things end up? Mostly in landfills, which is a big problem. But with the espresso machines, they're made of aluminum, and then they have a liner. And the problem with that liner is it's always made of some kind of plastic. Now, it's meant to be BPA-free in some of the higher-end models, which would be a good thing. But who knows what other plastics are in there and what they'll find out. Either way, you're putting hot liquid through aluminum and some kind of plastic. Probably not the best idea. On the other side, you're putting really hot liquid through plastic, which is definitely not a good idea. Again, even if it's BPA free, there are bisphenol A is the name of the plastic that's highly linked to hormone disruption, endocrine disruption. But there are lots of other plastics which maybe they just haven't figured out what they'll do. Maybe they won't disrupt your hormones, but maybe they'll block cellular respiration or screw up your microbiome, or who knows. I just don't think it's a great idea. And so a lot of people have been switching from these machines to kind of home espresso machines, which are of course nothing new, but the newer models are quite sophisticated. And so this is probably a better way to go. I don't think it makes sense to be every day drinking something that's been blasted through plastic and aluminum or just plastic. I don't think it's a great idea. I know these things are really convenient once in a while, probably not a big deal, but again, if you're a coffee drinker, whether it's normal coffee, decaf coffee, whatever it is, if you're blasting your hot liquid through one of those materials, it just seems like probably a recipe for disaster. Hope that's helpful. We have a listener question this week from Liz. Liz has Arnold-Chiari malformation. This is a condition that is new to me. I wasn't familiar with it before, still not very familiar with it. I've had a number of different health conditions, operations, and the specific situation, it was quite a long question, but I'll summarize it for you. Specific situation is number of health challenges and suffering currently from really bad daily chronic migraines. Migraines are debilitating. I've had close friends and colleagues who have them. Can literally ruin your life. Pain is a constant pain, is a low-grade stress that turns into a high-grade stress, and it just never goes away. It can really be as debilitating as any kind of physical injury or illness or anything like this. So the question that Liz is struggling with is what to do about the meds. She's got some medication that have been helping, but she's trying to figure out if she should take them or not. First and foremost, I'm just some guy on the internet, so please, talk to your doctor and figure out what makes the most sense for you. But secondly, I think that the most important thing to think about with medication is what makes the most sense in my if I need to, if and when I need to. Absolutely, surgery and chemical therapy and whatever needs to be done, because at the end of the day, if you are suffering and you can't get through the day, if your quality of life is so poor that you're missing out on life, or if your life is cut short because you refuse essential treatment, then I think it becomes ideology and not really a successful holistic health path. When you look at functional medicine, which is what most of the medical doctors we have on the show practice, functional medicine is not about natural or allopathic medicine. It's about what works, what functions, right? What can make the most sense. It's looking at the whole person, the whole life. In terms of chronic headaches specifically, I get this question a lot, and you'll see lots of articles and videos and so-called cures online about headaches. Headaches are really, really a mystery. In your case, it sounds like there could be something. It sounds like there is something very physical going on, meaning inflammation of your brain and perhaps some compressed cervical vertebra and things like this. In which case, you really have physiological things happening. For other people, it can be stress related. For other people, it can be diet or even allergy triggered. It's very challenging. My biggest suggestion, and this is not something I have direct experience with, but from people I've spoken to, is just really put on your investigator cap and keep asking good questions and make sure you're optimizing for the right thing, meaning you're not optimizing your health plan for some kind of ideology or some kind of ideal. You're optimizing your health plan for you and your quality of life and your, how you'd like to live your life, whether that means natural or medicated or whatever it is. Wish I could give you a better answer, but again, not a medical doctor, but that would just be the way that I might think about, not necessarily act on this particular challenge. Thanks for writing in, Liz. Good luck.
This week's iTunes review is by Yoga Wymantham from the UK. Yoga Wymantham says, "Every time I get an email to tell me a new podcast is ready, I instantly have to click on the link and listen. It's always informative, interesting, and I learn something new in every episode. I love the discount codes, and all the guest speakers have added something new to my understanding of yoga. I only joined recently, so I have been trying to work my way through old episodes. So much to learn and explore. I love it. This podcast blows my mind." Yoga Wymantham, you have won the Yoga Trapeze. Email us at podcast@yogabody.com and we will ship it to you.
If you're a regular Yoga Talk Show listener, you'll definitely want to get on my email list. Go to yogabody.com/sign me up. When you enter your email address there, we always have free giveaways every month. Yoga straps, water bottles, discounts in our shop, and all kinds of other things. When you sign up at yogabody.com/sign me up, I'll send you just one email a week with updates about the show, special offers, new courses, and valuable information that I think you'll find useful. So go to yogabody.com/sign me up to claim your free prize now.